There has been an explosion over the last couple of years of vintage-inspired re-releases by some of their big brands like Seiko, Citizen, Casio and Timex. It begs the question, should we be buying these newly released reissue watches, or should we just buy the real things from the 70s? In front of me I have two watches, a Q Timex reissue, gorgeous watch, but I also have a Seiko QR from the 1970s. Both of these watches are going to cost you around £180. So which one should you buy? Let's find out. Right, I'm going to keep it nice and simple. Here's all the reasons that I could think of anyway for buying a new reissue watch over an old vintage watch. Firstly, of course, it's a new watch. It's going to be lovely and clean. It's going to come in nice new packaging. No one's going to have worn it before. No one should have resized it or removed all the plastic. You'll get that experience of opening up a brand new watch. Nothing better, is there? And because it's new, it should come with some sort of warranty, sometimes 2, sometimes even 5 years, although I think watches like this Q Timex more likely to be 1, maybe 2 years warranty. Water resistance, okay, the ratings may not be fantastic, but you should be able to trust the ratings because all of the rubber grommets and seals will be brand new. And you'll get the full package. You'll get the watch and any tools or accessories that should have come with the watch. You'll get the packaging. You'll get, well, everything. Nothing should be missing, of course. And new quartz watches are more efficient. The battery should last longer. Some batteries in new watches last 10 years, although I suspect this Q Timex is more like 2, maybe 3 years. What you'll find with vintage quartz watches is those batteries will probably need to be changed every year or so. The loom should work on your new reissue. Okay, the loom on this Q Timex, not fantastic, and yeah, quite often the loom isn't great on more affordable quartz reissue watches, but what there is should work. And you shouldn't have any problems getting your new reissue watch to fit. Older vintage sort of Seiko and Citizen watches were primarily sold in the Japanese market, so had smaller bracelets, smaller straps. They could also be missing links, so yeah, if you've got an average or larger than average wrist, you may have to consider a new reissue over a genuine vintage Seiko or Citizen. And you'll also have peace of mind that you've got the watch how the manufacturer intended it to be and look. Most older vintage watches will have had some work done to them, maybe a bit of polishing, rebrushing. They may have even had new crystals. Some may have even had new dials. So there might sometimes be a question mark over those vintage watches. Are you actually getting a proper full vintage watch? But if you go for a new reissue, then you know it's all genuine. Nothing's been changed. It's exactly how it was intended to be. So those are all fairly persuasive arguments for buying a new reissue watch, but you should also consider, in my opinion, a proper old vintage watch for these reasons. It's a much better conversation starter. Do you know how many times I've gone up to people and said, the watch I'm wearing is 50 years old, and they have been shocked because some 50-year-old watches can look brand new. And it's quite something to get your head around the fact that this watch looks this good and yet it's been on the earth for 50 years and it still works perfectly and it looks incredible. I mean, just look at this thing. I just can't imagine going up to someone and going, look at my Q Timex, it's a reissue. Brilliant. And it's the real deal. It's a proper vintage watch. It's not been styled like that because that's how watches were in the 70s. It's been styled like that because, well, that's how watches were in the 70s. You know what I'm saying. It's not a copy. It's the genuine thing. And because it's the genuine thing, the quartz movement is so much better. Not just a little bit, not a lot better, an awful lot better. Quartz watches in the 70s were unbelievably expensive, more expensive than your luxury automatic watches. They really were. And because of that, they were built to incredible standards. They were built to last, which is why so many of them are still working today and look like this. Honestly, there's no comparison. The movement inside this Seiko QR is worlds away from the plastic parted quartz movement inside that Timex reissue. This Seiko QR QR will probably be working in another 50 years, and that Q Timex reissue will be, well, in a tip somewhere in 5 to 10 years, no doubt. And because the movements were built better, the seconds hands performed better, and what I mean by that is they hit the markers on almost every single occasion. They're not impacted by gravity. They have special levers and stuff inside them to make sure those seconds hands are rock solid. They hit the markers, they don't wobble, they don't deviate. Manufacturers put a lot of thought and effort into quartz watches in the 70s, and yeah, those second hands are solid. It's also going to retain its value much better. In fact, it could even go up in value. More and more people are starting to appreciate the value of these vintage quartz watches. That Q Timex reissue will undoubtedly go down in value a lot over the next couple of years, whereas this Seiko QR could actually increase in value. Because, and here's the next reason, when they were new, they were unbelievably expensive. You're getting an incredible deal when you buy a vintage Seiko Citizen, well, any Japanese vintage 70s quartz watch, I think. Those watches were so expensive in the 70s. The values have depreciated down to this point, around £180 for this watch, and like I've said already, could potentially increase in value. So yeah, you're getting a very expensive watch at an incredible price. And there's a lot more variety as well. Quartz watches in the 70s came in all shapes and sizes. They were incredible, simple, ornate, just unbelievable designs. So if you don't like this one, there will almost certainly be 100 other designs that you will like, whereas the reissue watches are being made in, well, limited styles and designs, aren't they? So you don't really have many to pick from. So which one's right for you? Well, I can't answer that for you, but I can answer it for me, and I can tell you undoubtedly for me, it's the original vintage watches. The arguments for those watches are just so strong. I do like the idea of buying new reissue watches, and I do think this Q Timex looks incredible. But there are hundreds of other vintage quartz watches out there that I think look even better, represent better value for money, are made better. But I am someone who is prepared to take a little bit of a risk. I also know a few people who can help me if I have problems with vintage watches, so it's perhaps easier for me to side with the vintage watches, the vintage quartz watches. Whereas if you're someone who's a little bit more conservative, doesn't have a massive budget, so might not be able to get your quartz vintage watches fixed if there's a problem with them, you like the styling but you just don't want to take a gamble, you like peace of mind, well then of course the Q Timex reissue watch is absolutely for you, and I don't think you'd regret buying this one. I've given Timex a really hard time recently, but I think this watch does look incredible. It's not one I would buy for me or my collection. I bought it to get it in to review. But yeah, I can totally see why people would side with these watches instead of the genuine ones. Guys, let me know what you think in the comments section. And have I missed any pros for buying the new reissues or the vintage quartz watches? Let me know in the comments section. These are all the points I could think of. Maybe you've got more to add. Cheers, guys. As always, thanks for watching.